When a broken man collapses at the edge of her storm-swept farm, solitary sheep farmer Maggie Holloway opens her home, and unknowingly her heart. But who is Elliot Grant? And what secrets did the storm wash in with him? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The rain pounded against the windows of Maggie Holloway's farmhouse as she stoked the fire in her old wood stove. At 38, she had grown accustomed to the sound of storms rolling through the hills of rural Oregon. Her small sheep farm, nestled between misty mountains, was the only home she'd known for the past decade. "Just you and me again tonight. Tucker," Maggie said to her sheepdog, who lay curled up on the worn rug near the fire. Tucker lifted his head, his intelligent eyes fixed on her. He'd been with her through everything: the long winters, the difficult lambing seasons, and the quiet nights when loneliness felt like another presence in the room. The wind howled outside, making the windows rattle. Maggie wrapped her cardigan tighter around herself and sipped her tea. Her muscles ached from a day of mending fences and tending to her small flock of sheep. Life on the farm was hard, but it was honest. Unlike people, sheep didn't lie or leave when things got tough. She'd learned that lesson early, losing her parents in a car accident when she was just 20. After that came a string of disappointments: a fiancé who couldn't handle rural life, friends who drifted away to cities, and a business partner who'd left her with debts it took years to pay off. Tucker suddenly jumped up, his ears perked. He ran to the door and began barking frantically. "What is it, boy?" Maggie put down her mug and followed him. The dog scratched at the door, looking back at her with urgency in his eyes. "Tucker, it's pouring out there. Whatever raccoon or deer you're after can wait until morning." But Tucker wouldn't stop. When she opened the door to call him back, he bolted into the darkness, his barking growing distant. "Damn it!" Maggie grabbed her raincoat and flashlight. "Tucker, come back here." She stepped out into the storm, instantly soaked despite her coat. The rain came down in sheets and the wind nearly knocked her off her feet. Her flashlight cut a weak path through the darkness as she followed Tucker's barking down toward the lower pasture. "If you've chased another rabbit, I swear." Maggie stopped short when her light caught something at the edge of her property. Tucker stood over a crumpled form on the ground. A person. "Oh my God!" Maggie rushed forward, her heart pounding. A man lay face down in the mud, unmoving. She knelt beside him, her fingers searching for a pulse on his neck. It was there, weak but steady. "Sir, can you hear me?" She gently rolled him over. His face was pale under a layer of mud and blood that trickled from a cut on his forehead. His clothes, though soaked and dirty, were clearly expensive. A tailored shirt, designer jeans, and a watch that probably cost more than her entire farm. The man groaned but didn't open his eyes. "I need to get you inside," Maggie said, though she knew he couldn't hear her. She looked back toward her farmhouse, then at the stranger. There was no way she could carry him by herself. For a split second, she considered calling for help, but the nearest neighbor was miles away, and in this storm it would take an ambulance at least an hour to reach them. "Tucker, stay with him," she commanded, then ran back to the house for her utility cart. 20 minutes later, soaking wet and exhausted, Maggie managed to drag the unconscious man into her guest room. She'd used the cart to transport him most of the way, but getting him up the porch steps and into bed had tested every muscle in her body. Tucker watched anxiously from the doorway as Maggie removed the man's wet jacket and shoes. She covered him with thick blankets, then examined the cut on his head. It wasn't deep, but head wounds always bled a lot. "Who are you?" she murmured, cleaning the wound with antiseptic. "And what were you doing out in this storm?" As she wiped mud from his face, Maggie was struck by how handsome he was. Strong jaw, straight nose, and thick dark hair now plastered to his forehead. He looked to be in his early 40s, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often, or used to. There was something about him that seemed familiar, like she'd seen his face somewhere before, maybe in a magazine or newspaper. After bandaging his head and checking for other injuries, Maggie pulled a chair next to the bed. Tucker settled at her feet, his eyes never leaving the stranger. "Good boy," she said, patting his head. "You found him. You saved his life." The storm continued to rage outside, but inside, an uneasy quiet settled over the farmhouse. Maggie knew she should probably feel afraid. She just brought a complete stranger into her home, miles from anyone who could help if he turned out to be dangerous. But something told her he wasn't a threat. Maybe it was the way Tucker had responded to him, or maybe it was the vulnerability she saw in his face as he lay there, fighting whatever battle was happening inside his unconscious mind. "Guess we'll know more when you wake up," she said softly. Elliot Grant opened his eyes to unfamiliar surroundings. Sunlight streamed through lace curtains, illuminating a simple room with wooden walls and handmade quilts. His head throbbed, and when he tried to sit up, the room spun wildly. "Take it easy," a woman's voice said. "You've got a nasty bump on your head." He turned to see a tall, slender woman standing in the doorway. She had auburn hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, bright green eyes, and a face that looked like it had weathered its share of storms, both literal and otherwise. She wore jeans, work boots, and a flannel shirt rolled up at the sleeves, revealing strong arms. "Where am I?" His voice came out as a croak. "My farm." She approached with a glass of water. "I found you passed out at the edge of my lower pasture last night. Well, actually, Tucker found you." As if on cue, a black and white sheepdog trotted into the room and sat beside the woman, watching Elliot with intelligent eyes. "Thank you," Elliot said, taking the water. His hands trembled slightly. "Both of you." "I'm Maggie Holloway. This is Tucker." She nodded toward the dog. "And you are?" Elliot hesitated. For a moment, he considered giving a false name. Back east, everyone knew who Elliot Grant was. Tech investor, real estate mogul. The man whose fiancée had just publicly dumped him after his business partner embezzled millions from their company. "Elliot," he said finally. "Elliot Grant." A flicker of recognition crossed Maggie's face, but she didn't comment on it. "Well, Elliot Grant, you want to tell me what you were doing out in that storm last night?" Elliot took another sip of water, buying time. The truth was too complicated, too raw. He'd fled New York after everything fell apart, driving across the country with no destination in mind, just needing to escape the reporters, the whispers, the pitying looks. "I was driving through," he said. "The storm hit hard. My car went off. The road about a mile back. I was walking to find help when I must have passed out. It wasn't the whole truth, but it wasn't a lie either." Maggie studied him for a moment, as if deciding whether to believe him. "That road doesn't lead anywhere, except my farm," she said. "And nobody just drives through this part of Oregon unless they're very lost." Elliot met her gaze. There was something refreshing about her directness. "I was lost," he admitted, "in more ways than one." Something in his voice must have convinced her, because her expression softened slightly. "Well, you're not going anywhere today," she said. "That cut needs time to heal, and you're probably concussed. I've got chores to do, but there's food in the kitchen when you're up to it. Thank you, Maggie. I don't know how to repay your kindness." "Don't worry about it. Tucker made the decision to save you. I'm just following his lead." She gave him a small smile. "Rest. We'll figure the rest out later." After she left, Elliot sank back against the pillows, closing his eyes against the sunlight that now seemed too bright. His head pounded, but it wasn't just from the injury. 3 weeks ago, his life had been perfect, or what passed for perfect in his world. He had been engaged to Catherine, a beautiful art gallery owner from a wealthy family. His investment firm was thriving under his and his partner Mark's leadership. He had everything. Then it all collapsed like a house of cards. Mark had been embezzling funds for years. When it came to light, investors pulled out in droves. Catherine returned his ring, claiming she needed someone stable. The press had a field day. Overnight, Elliot went from success story to cautionary tale, so he'd run. Packed a bag, got in his car, and just drove. No plan, no destination, just away. And now he was here, in a stranger's home, in the middle of nowhere, with nothing but the clothes on his back and a crushing sense of failure. Tucker padded into the room and sat beside the bed, resting his chin on the mattress near Elliot's hand. Without thinking, Elliot reached out to pet him. "You've got good instincts," he told the dog quietly. "Better than mine, clearly." Tucker's tail thumped against the floor. Outside the window, Elliot could see rolling hills dotted with sheep, a barn in need of paint, and endless sky. It was about as far from Manhattan as a person could get. Maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. Maggie threw herself into her chores, trying not to think about the man in her guest room. She fed the sheep, collected eggs from her small flock of chickens, and repaired a section of fence that had come loose in the storm. But her mind kept wandering back to Elliot Grant. The name had sounded familiar when he said it, and now she remembered where she'd heard it before. There had been something in the news about him, a scandal of some kind. She rarely paid attention to such things, preferring the company of her animals to the drama of the outside world. By midday, she returned to the house to find Elliot sitting at her kitchen table, looking pale but alert. He'd found her coffee maker and had a steaming mug in front of him. "Hope you don't mind," he said when she entered. "I needed the caffeine." "Not at all." Maggie washed her hands at the sink, acutely, aware of his presence behind her. "How's your head?" "Still attached, which I count as a win." There was a hint of humor in his voice that surprised her. She turned to face him. In the daylight, she could see him clearly for the first time. Despite his pallor and the bandage on his forehead, he was undeniably handsome, with dark brown eyes. That held a warmth she hadn't expected. His hands, wrapped around the coffee mug, were strong but refined, not the hands of someone who worked the land. "Are you hungry?" she asked, opening her refrigerator. "I can make sandwiches." "Please. And then maybe you can tell me where exactly I've landed." As Maggie prepared lunch, she gave him the basics. "You're about 20 miles west of Timber Creek, which itself is barely a dot on the map. Nearest real town is Oak Ridge, about an hour's drive. I raise sheep for wool mainly, keep chickens, grow most of my own vegetables." She set a plate in front of him. A simple sandwich with homemade bread, cheese, and sliced tomatoes from her garden. "Alone?" he asked, then quickly added, "I'm sorry, that's none of my business." "Yes, alone." "Well, with Tucker." She sat across from him with her own sandwich. "Been that way for years now, and I prefer it." Elliot nodded, taking a bite of his sandwich. "This is delicious. It's just a sandwich." "No, it's..." He seemed to search for words. "It's real. Been a while since I had anything real." There was something in the way he said it that made Maggie pause. A sadness, a weariness that went beyond physical injury. "Your car," she said, changing the subject. "We should try to get it towed." "Right." Elliot looked down at his plate. "About that, I should probably call someone. My phone was in the car. You can use mine, but cell service is spotty out here, especially after storms." As if on cue, thunder rumbled in the distance. Maggie glanced out the window to see dark clouds gathering again on the horizon. "Looks like round 2 is coming," she sighed. "We get a lot of this in October." "I can try to help," Elliot offered. "With your chores, I mean." Once my head stopped spinning, Maggie raised an eyebrow. "No offense, but you don't look like a man who's done much farm work." For the first time, a genuine smile crossed his face, transforming it completely. "Is it that obvious? Your watch probably costs more than my entire flock of sheep." He glanced down at his wrist, as if just remembering the expensive timepiece was there. "Fair point, but I'm a quick learner." Tucker, who had been lying near the wood stove, got up and came to rest his head on Elliot's knee. The gesture wasn't lost on Maggie. Tucker was an excellent judge of character, better than she was, certainly. "We'll see," she said, but there was less edge in her voice now. "First, you need to rest. Doctor's orders." "Are you a doctor?" "No, but I've patched up enough injured lambs to know when something needs time to heal." Elliot's smile faded, and he looked at her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "What?" she asked. "Nothing." He shook his head slightly. "It's just..." "Thank you, Maggie, for taking in a stranger. Not many would." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. She stood up, taking her plate to the sink. "Like I said, it was Tucker's call." She kept her back to him, afraid he might see something in her eyes she wasn't ready to share. "The storm's coming. I need to secure the barn." As she headed for the door, she added, "Make yourself at home, but don't get too comfortable. Once the road's clear, we'll figure out how to get you back to wherever you came from." She didn't wait for his response before stepping outside, inhaling the scent of rain in the air. Tucker followed, pressing against her leg as if sensing her unease. "Don't look at me like that," she told the dog. He's leaving as soon as he can. That's how it works. But as thunder rolled across the hills again, Maggie couldn't shake the feeling that the storm had brought something into her life that wouldn't be so easy to send away once the skies cleared. The second storm hit harder than the first. For 3 days, rain pounded the farmhouse, turning the dirt road to Maggie's property into an impassable river of mud. Phone lines went down, and cell service, already spotty in the hills, disappeared completely, which meant Elliot Grant was stuck. "I'm sorry about this," Maggie said as they sat at the kitchen table on the 3rd morning, listening to the battery-powered radio announce more flash flood warnings. "Once the road's clear, I'll drive you into town." Elliot looked up from his coffee. "Don't apologize. You've been more than kind." His color had returned, and the cut on his forehead was healing nicely. He'd borrowed some of Maggie's ex-boyfriend's clothes that she'd never bothered to throw away. Work shirts and jeans that were a bit too short for his tall frame, but better than his mud-caked designer clothes. "I should be the one apologizing," he added. "I'm an unexpected burden." "You're not so bad," Maggie admitted, surprising herself. "And you did help with the leak in the barn roof yesterday. Even though I nearly fell off the ladder." That was actually the entertaining part. He laughed, and Maggie found herself smiling in response. It felt strange, this easy conversation, the warmth in her kitchen despite the storm outside. For years, her days had followed the same pattern: work, solitude, sleep, repeat. Now there was this man sitting across from her, with his kind eyes, and a past he was clearly running from. Tucker lay between them, his head resting on Elliot's foot as if he'd known him forever. "Traitor," Maggie murmured to the dog. "He has excellent taste," Elliot said with a grin. The radio crackled with static, then announced that roads in the area would likely remain closed for at least another day. "Well," Maggie stood up, "since you're stuck here, you might as well earn your keep. The sheep need feeding, and I need to check on a pregnant ewe." "Lead the way," Elliot said, rising to his feet. "I promise not to be completely useless." They donned raincoats and boots and headed out to the barn. The wind whipped rain against their faces as they crossed the yard, and Maggie was acutely aware of Elliot close behind her. She couldn't remember the last time anyone had walked this path with her. In the barn, the smell of hay and animals created a warm, familiar comfort. The sheep huddled together, looking up as they entered. Tucker immediately went to work, circling the flock with the confidence of a dog who knew his job well. "They're beautiful," Elliot said, watching as Maggie checked on a ewe heavy with lamb. "Most people don't use beautiful when describing sheep," Maggie replied, her hands gently feeling the animal's sides. "Most people don't really look." Elliot knelt beside her. "How is she?" "Getting close, maybe a week." Maggie patted the ewe's woolly side. "Her name's Daisy. This will be her first lambing." "You name them all?" "Just the breeding ewes, the ones that stay." She straightened up and handed Elliot a pitchfork. "Here, make yourself useful while I check the others." To her surprise, Elliot tackled the chore of spreading fresh hay without complaint. He was clumsy at first, but he watched how she did it and adjusted his technique. By the time they finished feeding the animals, his expensive borrowed clothes were covered in hay and dirt, but he was smiling. "What?" Maggie asked, catching him watching her. "Nothing. It's just, you're in your element here. It's nice to see someone so connected to what they do." His words made her uncomfortable, not because they weren't true, but because they were. The farm was her life, her escape, her fortress against disappointment. Having someone see that so clearly was unsettling. "It's just work," she said, turning away. "Let's get back to the house before the rain gets worse." But as they walked back across the yard, the wind suddenly picked up, nearly knocking Maggie off her feet. Elliot's hand shot out, steadying her, his fingers warm through the sleeve of her coat. "Thanks," she muttered, pulling away quickly. "It gets like this sometimes." Inside, they shed their wet clothes in the mudroom. Maggie was painfully aware of Elliot's presence as they moved around each other in the small space. He smelled like rain and hay and something else, something expensive and distinctly city-like that clung to him despite days on the farm. "I'll make lunch," she said, escaping to the kitchen. As she pulled together a simple meal of soup and bread, she could hear Elliot in the living room, adding wood to the fire. It was too easy to get used to this. The sound of another person moving through her space, the warmth of conversation over meals, the help with daily chores. Too easy to forget that none of it was permanent. The rain finally stopped the next day, leaving behind a world washed clean and glistening in the autumn sunlight. Elliot stood on the porch, breathing in the crisp morning air. For the first time in months, maybe years, his mind was quiet. No phone calls, no meetings, no endless parade of people wanting things from him. Just this, sky and earth and the honest work of the day ahead. Roads should be passable by afternoon, Maggie said, joining him on the porch. I can take you into Oak Ridge then. You can call someone about your car, get a hotel until it's fixed. Elliot nodded, ignoring the strange pang her words caused. Thank you. Stop thanking me, she said, her voice gruff but not unkind. Come on, I need to check the fence line on the east pasture. Parts probably washed out in the storm. They walked side by side across fields still soggy from days of rain, Tucker racing ahead, then circling back as if to hurry them along. Then these sheep dotted the hillside, white against the green. How long have you lived here? Elliot asked. 10 years, bought it when land was cheap. After the mill closed, everyone said I was crazy. Why did you do it? Maggie was quiet for a moment. Needed somewhere to belong, I guess. My parents died when I was 20, car accident. After that, she shrugged. Cities never felt right. Too many people, none of them really seeing you. Elliot understood that, feeling better than she knew. And the sheep farming? My grandmother raised sheep. Spent summers with her as a kid. It was the only place I felt safe. She glanced at him. Your turn. What were you running from when your car went off the road? The directness of the question caught him off guard. In his world, people talked. Around painful truths, couched them in pleasantries. Everything. The word came out before he could stop it. My company. My engagement. My life. Maggie nodded as if this was a perfectly reasonable answer. Bad. The worst. He sighed. My business partner embezzled millions. The company's in ruins. My fiancée left. The press had a field day. So you drove across the country with no plan. Basically. They reached a section of fence that had indeed washed away. Maggie assessed the damage, then handed Elliot a pair of work gloves from her pocket. Hold these posts while I secure the wire, she instructed. They worked in silence for a while, the physical labor oddly soothing. Elliot found himself watching. Maggie's hands, strong, capable, moving with practiced efficiency, so different from Catherine's manicured fingers that never touched anything rougher than silk. You're staring, Maggie said without looking up. Sorry, it's just you know exactly what you're doing. It's impressive. She snorted. It's just fence mending, not rocket science. Still, you've built something real here, on your own terms. This time she did look up, her green eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his breath catch. And you haven't? The question hit him like a physical blow. Had he? His company had been successful, yes, but looking back, so much of what he'd built felt hollow, designed to impress, to compete, to win, not to truly satisfy or sustain. I thought I had, he said honestly. Now I'm not so sure. Maggie seemed to consider this, then nodded. That's a start at least. A start to what? Figuring out what matters. She turned back to the fence. Now hand me those wire cutters. By midday, they'd repaired most of the damage and were heading back to the house when Tucker suddenly took off toward a copse of trees at the edge of the property. Tucker, Maggie called, but the dog kept going. Damn it! He probably found another rabbit. They followed, cresting a small hill that overlooked a stream swollen with rainwater. Tucker stood barking at the water's edge, where Elliot could see something dark half submerged in the current. It's a car, he realized with a sinking feeling. My car. The sleek black sedan was nose down in the stream, water flowing through the broken windows. It must have been washed downstream during the height of the storm. Well, that complicates things, Maggie said. Elliot stared at the wreckage of his $80,000 car and felt nothing. No dismay, no anger, not even annoyance. Just a strange sense of liberation, as if the last tie to his old life had been severed. He started to laugh. Maggie looked at him like he'd lost his mind. You okay there? Perfect, he said between chuckles. Absolutely perfect. I spent more time choosing that car than I did my last house. And now it's just gone. Insurance will cover it, Maggie pointed out. That's not the point. He turned to her, still smiling. For years, I measured everything by what it cost. That car, my watch, my penthouse, they were all just status, symbols, and none of them meant a damn thing when everything fell apart. Maggie studied him, her expression unreadable. So what does mean something? The question sobered him. He looked around, at the rolling hills, the simple barn in the distance, at Tucker, who had gotten bored with the sunken car and was now sniffing around the base of a tree, and finally at Maggie, with her sun-freckled face and eyes that never looked away from hard truths. This, he said simply. Real work, real connections, no pretending. Something shifted in her expression, a softening she quickly masked. You've been on my farm for 4 days. Don't go having some rural epiphany just because you fixed a fence. But her words lacked their usual bite, and when they walked back to the house, they were standing a little closer than before. After lunch, Maggie dug out an old cell phone from a drawer. Signal's back, she said, sliding it across the table to Elliot. You should make your calls. Elliot stared at the phone for a long moment. This was it, the moment he reconnected with the world he'd fled. There were people he should call. His lawyer, his sister, maybe even Catherine, although that thought held little appeal now. What will you do? Maggie asked, watching him. After you get back to civilization? I don't know, he admitted. The company's probably unsalvageable. I could start over, I suppose, different industry, different approach. Is that what you want? Again, with the direct questions that stripped away all pretense. Elliot found himself answering with the same honesty. A week ago, I would have said yes without hesitation. Now, I'm not sure. Maggie nodded, then stood up. I'll give you some privacy. As she moved to leave, Elliot caught her hand. Maggie. She looked down at their joined hands, then at his. Face, her expression guarded. Thank you, he said softly. Not just for saving my life, for, I don't know, being real. A flush colored her cheeks, and she gently pulled her hand away. Make your calls, Elliot. Figure out your next move. After she left, Elliot sat staring at the phone for a long time before finally picking it up. He dialed a number he knew by heart. Emma, it's me. His sister's shocked voice came through, followed by a barrage of questions. I'm fine, I'm safe. I just needed to get away. No, I'm not coming back yet. I need some time to think. He answered her questions as vaguely as possible, promising to call again soon, but offering no timeline for his return. When he hung up, he felt a strange mix of relief and guilt. Looking out the window, he could see Maggie in the garden, harvesting what vegetables remained before the first frost. Tucker sat nearby, ever watchful. The scene was so peaceful, so far removed from the chaos he'd left behind. He dialed another number. Jake? It's Grant. I need a favor. Maggie didn't ask about Elliot's calls, and he didn't volunteer the information. They spent the afternoon in companionable silence. Maggie preserving the last of her tomatoes, Elliot repairing a wobbly chair that had needed fixing for months. You're not terrible at that, Maggie remarked, watching him sand down the rough edges. High praise indeed, he joked. I used to build things in college, furniture mostly, before I got caught up in the finance world. Why did you stop? Elliot shrugged. No time, no space in New York, no real need when you can buy whatever you want. Sounds empty. It was. He looked up at her. I didn't realize how empty until now. Their eyes held for a moment too long, and Maggie turned away first, focusing on sealing jars of tomato sauce. I was thinking, Elliot said carefully, I could stay a few more days, help out around here until my car situation gets sorted. Maggie didn't look up. You'd be bored in a week. I don't think so. You don't belong here, Elliot. Her voice was soft but firm. This isn't your world. Maybe my world wasn't working for me. Now she did look at him, her expression serious. This isn't some romantic movie where the rich city guy finds himself by playing farmer. Real life doesn't work that way. I know that. He put down the sandpaper. I'm not saying I want to buy a flock of sheep. I'm just saying I'd like a little more time before I have to decide what comes next. Maggie was quiet for so long that Elliot thought she was going to refuse. Finally, she sighed. 1 week. You can stay in the guest room, help with chores. After that, we reassess. It wasn't much, but it was something. Deal. That night, Maggie woke to Tucker's barking. Throwing on her robe, she hurried downstairs to find Elliot already in the kitchen, looking out the window. What is it? She asked. Coyotes, I think. He pointed to where shadows moved at the edge of the yard, eyes gleaming in the darkness. Tucker heard them first. They watched together as the wild dogs prowled around the edge of the property, their howls carrying on the night air. Tucker stood at alert, growling low in his throat. They won't come closer, Maggie said. Not with Tucker here, and they can't get to the sheep in the barn. But as she spoke, one of the coyotes darted forward, testing the boundaries. Tucker barked furiously, and without thinking, Elliot opened the door to let him out. No, Maggie cried, but it was too late. Tucker shot across the yard, chasing the coyote back. But instead of returning, he continued the pursuit, disappearing into the darkness with the pack on his heels. Tucker, Maggie called, panic rising in her voice. She turned to Elliot, anger flashing in her eyes. Why did you do that? He's not trained to fight coyotes. I'm sorry, I didn't think. That's right, you didn't. She grabbed a flashlight and her coat. Stay here. Like hell I will, Elliot said, already pulling on his boots. This is my fault. I'm coming with you. They searched for nearly an hour, calling Tucker's name into the darkness. The temperature had dropped, and their breath came out in white puffs in the beam of the flashlight. Tucker! Maggie's voice was growing hoarse. Where are you, boy? As they crested a hill, they heard a faint whining. Maggie swung the flashlight toward the sound and caught the reflection of Tucker's eyes. He was limping toward them, his black and white coat visible in the beam. Tucker! Maggie ran to him, dropping to her knees as the dog reached her. Are you okay, boy? Tucker whined again, holding up one paw. Blood matted the fur on his side, but the injury didn't look deep. He's hurt, Maggie said, running her hands over him. But I don't think it's serious. The relief in her voice was palpable, and when she looked up at Elliot, there were tears in her eyes, whether from anger or fear, he couldn't tell. I'm so sorry, he said, kneeling beside her. I wasn't thinking. In the city, dogs chase squirrels and come back. I didn't realize He's all I have, Maggie said, her voice cracking. Do you understand that? He's everything. The vulnerability in her face hit Elliot like a physical blow. He'd seen her strong, capable, self-sufficient, but this raw emotion was something she kept carefully hidden. I understand, he said softly. And I'm sorry. Truly. Tucker licked Maggie's face, then, to her apparent surprise, turned and licked Elliot's hand. Despite everything, a small smile tugged at her lips. Traitor, she murmured to the dog, then to Elliot. Help me get him back to the house. I've got a first aid kit for the animals. We'll need to clean that cut. They walked back slowly, Tucker limping between them. The anger had faded from Maggie's face, replaced by exhaustion and lingering worry. He'll be okay, Elliot assured her. He's tough. Like his owner, Maggie said with a tired smile. At the house, they worked together to clean Tucker's wound and bandage his paw. The dog bore their ministrations with surprising patience, his eyes moving from one to the other as if supervising their work. When they finished, Tucker laid his head in Maggie's lap, his tail thumping weakly against the floor. Good boy, she whispered, stroking his head. You scared me. Both of us, Elliot added. He hesitated, then gently placed his hand on Maggie's shoulder. I really am sorry. She covered his hand with her own just for a moment. I know. Neither of them mentioned that his 1-week stay had just begun, or that in 7 days he would have to decide whether to return to a life in ruins or chart a new course. For now, in the quiet of the kitchen with Tucker safe between them, it was enough to simply be. But as Maggie finally went back to bed, leaving Elliot to settle Tucker in his bed by the wood stove, she couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. In her carefully constructed solitude, a door had opened, one that would be hard to close again when Elliot Grant inevitably walked away. Days on a farm follow the rhythm of the sun and the needs of the animals, not the artificial schedules of city life. Elliot discovered this quickly as his one-week stay stretched into its fourth day. He woke before dawn, ate simple meals when hunger struck, and fell into bed each night with muscles aching from honest work. And he'd never felt more alive. "You're holding it wrong," Maggie said, adjusting his grip on the shears. They were in the barn and she was teaching him how to trim a sheep's hooves, a task Elliot had never imagined himself doing a month ago. "Like this?" he asked, following her guidance. "Better." She stood close behind him, her arms reaching around to demonstrate, firm but gentle, just like with people. The sheep between them bleated impatiently. "Sorry, Mabel," Elliot told the animal. "I'm learning on the job." Maggie's laugh was warm against his ear. She's not impressed. Neither of them mentioned that his week was more than halfway over. Neither brought up the calls he'd made to the outside world, or the decision that loomed with each passing day. Instead, they worked side by side, sharing meals and gradually stories. Elliot learned that Maggie had once been engaged to a man who couldn't handle her independence. She learned that he'd started his company from nothing, sleeping on friends' couches during the lean years before success found him. By the fifth day, they moved around each other with the ease of people who'd known each other much longer. Elliot could anticipate when Maggie needed the hay fork passed to her. She knew exactly how he liked his coffee in the morning. It was comfortable, and for both of them, thoroughly unsettling. "You never told me what happened with your fiancé," Maggie said as they sat on the porch that evening, watching the sunset paint the hills gold. Tucker lay between them, his injured paw nearly healed. Elliot took a sip from his mug of tea. "Catherine," he said, the name feeling strange on his tongue as if it belonged to another lifetime. "She left when the scandal broke, said she needed someone stable." Ouch. The funny thing is, I wasn't even that heartbroken. Disappointed, yes. Embarrassed, definitely. But I realized later that what hurt most was my pride, not my heart. Maggie considered this. "So you didn't love her?" "I thought I did." He looked out at the darkening sky. "We made sense on paper, both successful from similar backgrounds. She was beautiful, sophisticated, the perfect partner for business dinners and charity galas, but I don't think I ever really knew her, or she me." He turned to look at Maggie. "Not like this." Something flickered in her eyes. Uncertainty, perhaps, or fear. She stood up quickly, breaking the moment. "It's getting cold. We should head in." Elliot wanted to reach for her hand to ask her to stay, but he held back. Maggie's walls were built from years of disappointment, and he was still, in many ways, a stranger passing through her life. Instead, he followed her inside, where the warmth of the wood stove and the quiet companionship of the evening ahead waited. The forest. Next morning, Maggie rose early and slipped out while Elliot was still sleeping. She needed space to think, to breathe without his presence filling every corner of her home and thoughts. She walked to the far pasture with Tucker limping slightly beside her. The autumn air was crisp, the hills vibrant with changing leaves. It was her favorite time of year, when the world transformed before settling into winter's rest. "What am I doing, Tucker?" she asked the dog, who looked up at her with his usual wise expression. "He's leaving in 2 days, back to his real life." Tucker offered no answer, just pressed against her leg as they walked. The truth was, Maggie had grown accustomed to Elliot's presence far too quickly. His thoughtful questions, his willing hands, his laugh that seemed to come easier with each passing day. The way he looked at her, not with pity for her solitary existence, but with genuine admiration. It was dangerous, this feeling. She'd built her life carefully, constructed walls to protect herself from exactly this sort of vulnerability. At the crest of the hill, she paused. In the distance, she could see the outline of her farmhouse, smoke curling from the chimney. Elliot must be up making coffee, stoking the fire, playing house in a world that wasn't his, because that was the truth of it, wasn't it? No matter how natural he seemed here, he belonged to another life. Board meetings and business deals, elegant restaurants and penthouse views. Sooner or later, that world would call him back, and she would be alone again, just as she'd always been. With a sigh, Maggie turned back toward the house. She'd known from the start this was temporary. It was foolish to wish for anything more. When she reached the yard, she was surprised to see Elliot outside, speaking with a man she didn't recognize. A shiny truck was parked in her driveway, out of place against the weathered farm buildings. Tucker barked and ran ahead, his injury forgotten in his excitement at the visitor. Maggie followed more cautiously. "There you are," Elliot said as she approached. "Maggie, this is Jake, an old friend of mine. Jake, this is Maggie Holloway." The stranger extended his hand. He was tall and well-dressed, with an easy smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Nice to meet you, Ms. Holloway. Elliot's told me a lot about you." "Has he?" Maggie shook his hand briefly, then looked to Elliot for explanation. "Jake brought some things from the city," Elliot said, "including a new phone." "And an update on your situation," Jake added. "We need to talk, Elliot. Things are moving quickly." There, it was, the real world, intruding on whatever temporary peace they'd found. Maggie felt a coldness settle in her chest. "I'll leave you two to catch up," she said, moving toward the house. "Actually," Jake said, reaching into his jacket, "I brought something for you as well, Ms. Holloway." He handed her a magazine. The glossy cover featured a photo of Elliot in an expensive suit, his expression serious and commanding. The headline read, "Grant Empire in Crisis, Betrayal, Theft, and the Fall of a Tech Giant." Maggie stared at the image, then at the real Elliot standing before her in mud-splattered jeans and her ex's flannel shirt. The contrast was jarring. "I thought you might want to know who you've been harboring," Jake said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Jake," Elliot's voice held a warning. "It's fine," Maggie said, her voice carefully neutral. "I'll be inside." She walked away, the magazine heavy in her hands, Tucker following close behind. Inside the house, she placed the magazine on the kitchen table and stood looking at it, at the stranger on the cover who wore Elliot's face. It took nearly an hour for Elliot to come inside. When he did, his expression was troubled. "Maggie, I can explain." "No need." She gestured to the magazine. "Your friend made things pretty clear. Jake doesn't know everything." "And I do?" She finally looked at him directly. "I know you're Elliot Grant, tech mogul. I know your company's in trouble. I know you ran away when things got tough." Her words stung, but Elliot didn't flinch. "That's true, but it's not the whole truth." "Then what is?" She crossed her arms. "Because from where I'm standing, you've been playing some kind of game. Poor little rich boy finding himself on a sheep farm. Is that it?" "No." Elliot stepped closer. "Nothing about this has been a game. Not to me." "Then why hide who you really are? Why not tell me everything from the start?" "Because I didn't want you to look at me the way you're looking at me right now." His voice softened. "Like I'm someone else. Someone you don't know." Maggie wanted to stay angry. Anger was safer than the other emotions swirling inside her. But seeing the genuine hurt in his eyes made it difficult. "What did your friend want?" she asked instead. Elliot sighed, running a hand through his hair. "The company's collapsing. The board is meeting next week to decide its fate. Jake thinks I should come back, try to salvage what I can. And what do you think?" "I think..." He looked around the kitchen, at the simple surroundings that had become so familiar. "I think I've been happier here, fixing fences and trimming sheep hooves than I ever was in that corner office." The honesty in his voice made something tighten in Maggie's chest. "That's just the novelty talking. New things always seem better." "It's not that." Elliot stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head up to meet his gaze. "It's you, Maggie. The way you live, honestly, on your own terms. No pretense, no games. I've never known anyone like you." She looked away, uncomfortable with the intensity in his eyes. "You don't really know me at all, don't I?" He reached out, gently turning her face back to his. "I know you talk to your sheep when you think no one's listening. I know you read mystery novels before bed. I know you're the strongest, most self-sufficient person I've ever met, and it terrifies you to need anyone else." Tears pricked at Maggie's eyes, and she blinked them away angrily. "Stop." "Why?" "Because you're leaving." The words burst out of her. "In 2 days, you'll be gone, back to your real life. And I'll be here exactly where I've always been." Elliot was quiet for a moment. What if I didn't go back? What if I stayed? The question hung in the air between them, impossible and tempting all at once. "You can't stay here," Maggie said softly. "This isn't your world." It could be. He took her hand, his fingers warm against hers. If you wanted it to be. Maggie pulled away the moment too much too soon. You need to figure out your own life before you start imagining one with me. Hurt flashed across his face, but he nodded. You're right, I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, just be honest. She picked up the magazine and handed it to him. Starting with this, tell me everything, Elliot, the whole truth. So he did. They sat at the kitchen table while he explained how his partner, Mark, had been embezzling funds for years. How the scandal had broken just weeks before his planned wedding to Catherine, the gallery owner who'd been more interested in his bank account than his heart. How he'd fled New York when the press turned his life into front-page news, driving aimlessly until the storm brought him to her door. I was running away, he admitted. From the mess, from the responsibility, from the life I'd built that suddenly felt like a prison. And now, Maggie asked, what do you want now? Elliot looked at her, his expression open and vulnerable. To start over, to build something real, whether that's a new company or something else entirely. The implication hung between them, unspoken but clear. Maggie stood up, needing distance from the intensity of his gaze. It's not that simple. It could be. Elliot rose too, but didn't move toward her. I'm not asking for promises, Maggie. Just a chance to figure out if there's something here worth exploring. Before she could answer, Tucker suddenly barked, rushing to the door. A moment later, they heard a vehicle coming up the drive. Are you expecting someone? Elliot asked. Maggie shook her head and moved to the window. A sleek black car was pulling up beside Jake's truck. Who on earth? The car door opened and a woman stepped out. She was tall and slender, dressed in clothes that screamed money and city life. Her blonde hair was styled perfectly despite the drive on rural roads. Elliot came to stand beside Maggie, his body tensing as he saw the visitor. Who is that? Maggie asked, though she already suspected the answer. Catherine, Elliot said, his voice flat. My ex-fiancée. Catherine Rothschild was exactly the kind of woman Maggie had imagined Elliot with. Elegant, polished, and completely out of place on a sheep farm. Her heels sank into the mud of the yard as she approached the house, her expression a mixture of determination and distaste. Elliot, she called, spotting him through the open door. Thank God I found you. You wouldn't believe the drive out here. Tucker growled low in his throat. Maggie laid a hand on his head to quiet him, then stepped onto the porch. Can I help you? She asked. Catherine looked her up and down, taking in Maggie's work clothes and boots with barely concealed judgment. You must be the farmer Jake mentioned. I'm Catherine Rothschild, Elliot's fiancée. Ex-fiancée, Elliot corrected, coming to stand beside Maggie. What are you doing here, Catherine? What do you think? I came to bring you back to New York. She attempted to climb the porch steps in her impractical shoes. We need to talk privately, darling. Anything you have to say to me, you can say in front of Maggie, Elliot said firmly. Catherine's perfect. Features hardened slightly. Fine, the board is meeting on Monday. If you're not there, they'll vote to liquidate the company. Everything you built will be gone. I'm aware of the situation. Are you? Because you've been playing farmer while your life falls apart. Catherine glanced around with undisguised disdain. This little vacation has gone on long enough, don't you think? Maggie felt herself stiffen at Catherine's tone. She'd been dismissed by people like this before. Wealthy city folk who saw her lifestyle as quaint at best, pathetic at worst. I think, Elliot said carefully, that you should explain why you're really here, Catherine. You made your feelings quite clear when you returned my ring. A flash of irritation crossed Catherine's face before she smoothed it away with a practiced smile. That was a mistake. I was shocked by everything that happened with Mark, but I've had time to think, and I know now that we can get through this together. She reached for Elliot's hand, but he stepped back. You left when things got difficult, when my reputation was damaged. I was confused, scared. Catherine's voice softened to a pleading tone that sounded rehearsed to Maggie's ears. But I've never stopped loving you, Elliot. We can fix this. Your company, our relationship, everything. Maggie felt suddenly out of place, an intruder in a drama that had nothing to do with her. She started to move back toward the door, but Elliot caught her arm gently. "Stay," he said quietly. Then to Catherine, "I'm not the same person who left New York, and I don't think I want the same things anymore." Catherine's eyes narrowed as she looked between them. Understanding dawned on her face, followed by disbelief. "You can't be serious," she said. "Her? This is what your little crisis of faith has led to." "That's enough," Elliot's voice was firm. "You don't know Maggie. You don't know anything about my life here." "Life? You don't have a life here, Elliot. You're hiding." Catherine stepped closer, lowering her voice. "What could this place possibly offer you that compares to what we had? What we could have again?" It was the question Maggie had been asking herself since Elliot first suggested staying. What could her simple farm offer someone like him? A man, used to wealth, influence, and all the luxuries money could buy? To her surprise, Elliot laughed, not unkindly but with genuine amusement. "You know, a week ago I might have struggled to answer that. But now?" He looked around at the farm, then at Maggie. "Now I know exactly what this place offers that I never had in New York." "And what's that?" Catherine asked coldly. "Peace, purpose, honesty." His eyes held Maggie's. "A chance to be the person I want to be, not the person everyone expects." Catherine's face hardened. "You're making a mistake. This infatuation won't last. You'll miss the city, your real life. You'll resent ending up in the middle of nowhere, with sheep and dirt and," she gestured at Maggie, "someone who could never understand your world." Her words hit too close to Maggie's own fears. She pulled away from Elliot's light grip and stepped back. "She's right," Maggie said quietly. "I don't belong in your world, Elliot, and eventually you'll remember that you don't belong in mine." "Maggie," Elliot started, but she shook her head. "You should talk to Catherine. Sort things out." She looked at the elegant woman, then at Elliot. "You had a life before you ended. Up here, you can't just throw it away." Before either could respond, Maggie whistled for Tucker and walked away, heading toward the barn where she could be alone with her thoughts. Behind her, she heard Catherine's voice, now softer, more persuasive. Maggie didn't slow down to hear what she was saying. Some truths were too painful to face head-on. Elliot found her an hour later, sitting on a hay bale in the barn, Tucker's head in her lap. The dog thumped his tail at Elliot's approach, but didn't move from his position. "She's gone," Elliot said, sitting beside Maggie. "I called her a cab." Maggie nodded, still stroking Tucker's fur. And nothing. Whatever she and I had is over. It has been for a long time, probably even before the scandal." They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the soft shifting of the sheep in their pen and Tucker's contented sighs. "She wasn't wrong, you know," Maggie finally said, "about us being from different worlds. Different doesn't mean incompatible." Elliot turned to face her. "Maggie, look at me." She did, reluctantly. "I know what you're thinking, that this is just temporary, that I'm just running away from my problems and using your farm as a hideout." He took her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. "But that's not what's happening, at least not anymore." "Then what is happening?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm finding my way back to the person I was always meant to be. Before the money and the status and all the things that don't really matter." He squeezed her hand. "And I'm falling in love with a woman who sees me, really sees me, for the first time in my life." The word love hung in the air between them. Fragile and new. Maggie's heart raced, but years of disappointment made her cautious. "It's been less than 2 weeks," she said. "You can't know that. Some things you just know." Elliot smiled. "Like when I first opened my eyes in your guest room and saw you standing there. Something inside me said, 'Pay attention. This matters.'" Despite herself, Maggie felt a smile tugging at her lips. That was probably just the concussion talking. Elliot laughed. "Maybe. Or maybe it was the clearest my head has been in years." He reached up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle. "I do have to go back to New York," he said softly. "There are responsibilities I can't just abandon. People who depend on me, whose livelihoods are at stake." Maggie nodded, the brief warmth in her chest cooling. "I understand. But I'm coming back," he continued, "if you'll let me. Elliot, I'm not asking you to change your life. I'm not asking for promises. I'm just asking for a chance. His eyes held hers, sincere and hopeful. A chance to see if what started here could grow into something real. Maggie looked away out at her farm, the fields she'd tended alone for so long, the future she'd planned in solitude. Change was terrifying. Trusting someone else, even more so. I've been alone a long time, she said finally. I'm used to it. Comfortable with it even. I know. Elliot's voice was gentle. And if that's what you truly want, I'll respect it. But I don't think it is. Not anymore. He was right, though she was afraid to admit it. These past days with Elliot had awakened something in her, a longing for connection she'd buried beneath layers of self-sufficiency and caution. What about your company? She asked. Your life in New York? I'll go back and face the board. Do what I can to save the jobs of the people who work for me. But after that, he shrugged. I own a perfectly good stretch of land not far from here that I've never even visited. My realtor says it has an old house that needs work, but good bones. Maggie's eyes widened. What are you saying? I'm saying I bought the Morrison property last year as an investment. It's just sitting there, waiting for someone to make it into a home. His smile was tentative. Maybe even a therapeutic animal shelter, if the right partner came along. You knew about my dream for a shelter? Maggie asked, surprised. I never told you that. You talk in your sleep, Elliot admitted. One night, when you fell asleep on the couch, you were talking about turning the Eastfield into a place where troubled kids could come to work with the animals. Maggie flushed. No one had ever paid such close attention to her dreams before, spoken or unspoken. It's just an idea I've had, she said. Nothing concrete. It's a beautiful idea, and it could be real. Elliot's eyes were earnest. I have resources, Maggie, connections, ways to help make it happen if that's what you want. The possibility hung between them, not just of a relationship, but of a shared vision, a future built together. It was tempting and terrifying all at once. Need time, she said finally, to think about what this means, all of it. Elliot nodded, understanding in his eyes. I'll give you all the time you need, but I leave for New York tomorrow. The board meeting is Monday morning. So soon. I have to face what I left behind. He squeezed her hand again. But I promise you this, Maggie Holloway. No matter what happens in that boardroom, I'm coming back to you, if you'll have me. Tucker lifted his head from Maggie's lap and nuzzled Elliot's hand, as if giving his approval to the plan. Despite everything, Maggie laughed. He's never taken to anyone like he has to you, she said. Not in all these years. Dogs. Know things we don't, Elliot replied, scratching behind Tucker's ears. Like who belongs where. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the barn doors, they sat together in comfortable silence. No promises had been made, no future certain. But for the first time in years, Maggie allowed herself to imagine a life different from the one she'd carefully constructed, a life with room for someone else, for new dreams, for love. And as frightening as that was, it was also undeniably, unexpectedly beautiful. The morning of Elliot's departure dawned clear and cold, with frost sparkling on the grass and a hint of winter in the air. Maggie sat on the porch steps, wrapped in a thick sweater, watching as Jake loaded Elliot's few belongings into the truck. Tucker lay at her feet, his eyes tracking Elliot's movements across the yard. The dog seemed to understand. Something was changing, they all did. That's everything, Jake called, closing the truck door. We should hit the road if we want to make the evening flight. Elliot nodded, then turned to Maggie. Can we talk? Just for a minute. Jake took the hint and climbed into the driver's seat, leaving them alone. So, Maggie said, trying to keep her voice light, back to the real world. This is real too, Elliot said, sitting beside her on the steps. What happened here? What's still happening? It's the most real thing in my life. Maggie looked down at her hands. You say that now, and I'll say it when I'm back in New York, and when I return. He took her hand, his fingers warm against the morning chill. I meant what I said yesterday, Maggie, all of it. She met his eyes, searching for doubt or hesitation and finding none. Only certainty and something else that made her heart race. I believe that you believe it, she said carefully. But once you're back in your world, surrounded by all the things you left behind, I'll be thinking of you. he finished. Of this place. Of the piece I found here that I never knew I was missing. From the truck, Jake honked lightly. Elliot sighed. I have to go. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. Here, my numbers, email, everything, so you can reach me while I'm gone. Maggie took it, suddenly unsure what to say. Words had never been her strong suit, especially when it came to feelings. Take care of yourself, she finally managed. And good luck with the board. Elliot smiled, though his eyes were sad. Always practical. That's one of the things I love about you. There it was again, that word. Love. It hung in the air between them, impossible to ignore. Elliot, You don't have to say anything, he interrupted gently. I know this is fast. I know it's complicated. I'm not asking for promises. Then, what are you asking for? Just think about possibilities, about what could be, instead of all the reasons why it can't. Before she could respond, he leaned forward and kissed her. Not tentatively, but with certainty and warmth. His hand cradled her face as if she were something precious. And for a moment, Maggie let herself believe she could be. When they broke, apart, she was breathless. I'll come back, Elliot said, his voice low and determined. Whatever happens in New York, I'll come back to you. Maggie nodded, not trusting herself to speak. With a final lingering look, Elliot stood and walked to the truck. Tucker whined softly, rising to his feet as if to follow. Stay, boy, Maggie said, her voice catching. He'll be back. But as the truck disappeared down the long driveway, she wondered who she was trying to convince, Tucker or herself. The farm felt impossibly quiet without Elliot. Maggie threw herself into work, fixing the chicken coop that had needed repairs for months, reorganizing the tool shed, anything to keep her hands and mind occupied. But everywhere she looked, she saw traces of him. The fence they'd mended together, the kitchen chair he'd fixed, the spot by the fire where he'd sit reading in the evenings. By nightfall, exhaustion had settled into her bones, but sleep remained elusive. She sat at the kitchen table, Elliot's folded note in front of her, unopened. Calling him would make... This reel would acknowledge that she'd allowed someone to matter again after years of careful isolation. It was terrifying. Tucker nudged her hand, his eyes questioning. What do you think, boy? She asked, scratching behind his ears. Are we making a mistake? The dog tilted his head, then padded to the door, looking back at her expectantly. Not now, Tucker, it's dark out, but he insisted, whining softly. With... A sigh, Maggie grabbed her coat and flashlight. 5 minutes, that's it. Outside, the night was clear and cold. Stars scattered across the dark sky like diamonds. Tucker led her across the yard to the hill where they'd found Elliot's sunken car. Once there, he sat, looking up at the stars. Maggie laughed despite herself. This is what was so important, stargazing. But as she stood in the silence, breathing in the crisp air, a strange peace settled over her. This was her land, her home, her life. And for the first time in years, she was considering sharing it with someone else. Not out of weakness or need, but out of choice. Because somehow, in the span of 2 weeks, Elliot Grant had carved out a space in her carefully constructed world, a key space that now felt empty without him. Back at the house, Maggie finally unfolded the paper Elliot had given her. Inside, along with his contact information, he'd written a simple message. Some people find each other by chance, some by design. We found each other in the rain. I think that means something. I'll be waiting for your call, however long it takes. With trembling fingers, Maggie reached for her phone. The board meeting was going exactly as Elliot had expected, poorly. 14 men and women in expensive suits sat around a gleaming conference table, their expressions ranging from disappointment to barely concealed glee at his downfall. The fact remains, Robert Chen, the head of the board, was saying, the company has lost the trust of its investors. Without immediate and decisive action, we're looking at complete collapse within 3 months. Elliot nodded, accepting the harsh reality. I understand the situation. What I'm proposing is a restructuring, not a liquidation. A restructuring? Under whose leadership? Asked Monica Patel, one of the few board members who'd remained supportive. Yours? After you disappeared for nearly 2 weeks during the biggest crisis this company has ever faced. The question stung, but Elliot met her gaze steadily. I needed time to gain perspective, to remember why I built this company in the first place. And did you? Robert asked, his tone skeptical. Remember? Yes. Elliot stood looking around, the table at the faces watching him. I started Grant Tech because I wanted to build something meaningful, something that solved real problems for real people. Somewhere along the way, it became about stock prices and market share instead. That's business, Elliot, someone muttered. It doesn't have to be. Elliot picked up the folder in front of him and passed copies around the table. This is my proposal. A complete reorganization starting with my resignation as CEO. Murmurs rippled around the room. You're stepping down? Monica asked, surprised. Yes, I'll remain on the board, but the company needs new leadership. Someone who can restore trust while maintaining our core values. Elliot gestured to the proposal. I'm recommending James Foster for the position. More surprised murmurs. James had been with the company since the early days, heading their research division with quiet competence. Additionally, Elliot continued, I'm proposing we refocus on our original mission, developing technology that makes a tangible difference in people's lives. Our healthcare initiatives, our sustainable energy projects, these should be our priorities, not short-term profits. This is all very noble, Robert said, but it doesn't address the immediate financial crisis. Turn to page 3. Elliot waited as they flipped through the document. I'm personally guaranteeing a cash infusion to stabilize the company while we restructure. No loans, no strings attached. The room fell silent as the board members processed this information. That's a significant amount of your personal fortune, Monica said quietly. Yes, it is. Elliot smiled slightly. Turns out I don't need 3 vacation homes or a private jet. Some things matter more. As the discussion turned to the technical aspects of his proposal, Elliot felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. Excusing himself, he stepped into the hallway to check the message. It was from Maggie. Tucker misses you. Maybe I do too. Call when you can. Something tight in his chest loosened. He quickly typed a response. Meeting running long, we'll call tonight. Miss you both. Before returning to the boardroom with renewed purpose. 3 hours later, the votes were cast. The restructuring would proceed, with James Foster as the new CEO. The Grant Tech that emerged would be smaller, more focused, but built on a stronger foundation of purpose rather than pure profit. As Elliot gathered his papers, Robert approached him. I have to admit, I didn't expect this from you, the older man said. I thought you'd either fight to keep control or walk away entirely. A few weeks ago I might have, Elliot acknowledged, but I've had some time to think about what really matters. Robert studied him curiously. This sudden change of perspective wouldn't happen to involve whatever or whoever you were doing during your absence, and would it? Elliot smiled. Let's just say I found some clarity in an unexpected place. The week after Elliot left was the longest of Maggie's life. They spoke every night, awkward, halting conversations at first that gradually eased into comfortable exchanges about their days. He told her about the board meeting, his decision to step down as CEO, the restructuring plans that consumed his days. She shared stories about the farm, Daisy the ewe who was getting closer to delivery, Tucker's continued recovery. They carefully avoided discussions of the future, of what would happen when his business in New York was concluded. It seemed safer somehow to live in this in-between state, neither committed nor separated. But on the 7th day, as Maggie was mucking out the barn, she heard Tucker barking excitedly. Setting down her pitchfork, she stepped outside to see a taxi coming up the drive. Her heart jumped to her throat. It was too soon. Elliot had said he'd be at least another week in New York finalizing the transition. Yet there he was, stepping out of the cab with a single duffel bag, paying the driver who looked relieved to be back on paved roads. Tucker reached him first, nearly knocking him over in his enthusiasm. Maggie hung back, suddenly uncertain. Elliot looked different somehow, dressed in simple jeans and a sweater rather than his borrowed clothes, but with the ease of a man who belonged exactly where he was. You're early, she said when he approached, Tucker circling them both joyfully. Couldn't stay away. His smile was warm, but his eyes were searching her face, looking for signs of welcome or regret. "Is that okay?" Instead of answering, Maggie closed the distance between them and kissed him, a gesture that surprised them both with its boldness. When they broke apart, Elliot's smile had widened. "I'll take that as a yes." Later, as evening settled over the farm, they sat on the porch swing, mugs of hot cider in hand. Elliot had spent the afternoon helping with chores, moving with the confidence of someone who'd done this before, who belonged. "I've been thinking," Maggie said, breaking a comfortable silence, "about what you said before you left, about possibilities." Elliot turned to her, his expression open. And I'm still scared," she admitted. "I've been alone a long time. I built this life deliberately, brick by brick. I know. And I would never ask you to tear it down. But," she raised an eyebrow, "but maybe there's room to build something alongside it. Something we create together." Maggie took a deep breath. "I want to see your land, the Morrison property." Elliot's eyes widened slightly in surprise. "Really? Really?" She looked out at her farm, at the life she'd built. "I've been thinking about the animal therapy idea for years, never had the resources to make it happen. And now I'm thinking that maybe I don't have to do everything alone." She met his gaze. "That maybe some dreams are better shared." The hope in Elliot's eyes was almost painful to see. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm saying I want to try. This, us." Maggie gestured between them. "I can't promise. It will work. We're from different worlds with different lives." "Not so different anymore," Elliot said. "The company's in good hands with James. I'll still consult, still serve on the board, but I don't need to be in New York for that. Most of it can be done remotely with occasional trips back." "You'd really do that? Leave everything behind?" "I'm not leaving anything that matters." He took her hand. "The truth is, Maggie, I've never felt more myself than I have here with you. Like I finally stopped playing a role and just lived." The sincerity in his voice made her heart ache. "What if it doesn't work out? What if a month from now you're bored of sheep and mud and country life? What if I'm not?" he countered. "What if this is exactly where I'm supposed to be?" Tucker, who had been lying at their feet, suddenly lifted his head. His ears perked up, and he bolted from the porch, barking excitedly. "What is it now?" Maggie sighed, setting down her cider. "Probably another rabbit." But as they watched, a car appeared on the long driveway, an unfamiliar sedan that moved cautiously over the rutted dirt road. "Are you expecting someone?" Elliot asked. Maggie shook her head. "No one comes out here except the feed delivery, and that's not until next week." They watched as the car parked, and a woman stepped out, slender, professional-looking, with a briefcase in hand. "Not Catherine," Maggie noted with relief, "but someone with a similarly city-polished air." "Elliot," the woman called, spotting them on the porch. "Oh, thank goodness I found you. You are impossible to reach out here." Elliot stood, recognition dawning on his face. "Emma, what are you doing here?" The woman approached, Tucker circling her cautiously. "What do you think? Looking for my brother who decides to drop off the face of the earth during a company crisis, then calls to say he's planning to move to the middle of nowhere." She reached the porch steps, then noticed Maggie. "Oh, hello. Emma, this is Maggie Holloway," Elliot said. "Maggie, my sister Emma Grant." "The sheep farmer," Emma said, her tone neutral but her eyes sharp and assessing. "Elliot's told me about you and this place." Maggie nodded, immediately feeling self-conscious about her work clothes and the simplicity of her home compared to the world the Grants came from. "Can I get you something to drink?" she offered. "Coffee? Tea?" "Coffee would be wonderful, thank you." Emma's smile was polite but reserved. "Then perhaps my brother and I could have a word." Maggie nodded and retreated to the kitchen, leaving the siblings on the porch. Through the window she could see them talking intensely, Emma gesturing emphatically, Elliot listening with a patient expression. As the coffee brewed, Maggie fought down a wave of doubt. This was the reality. Elliot's world intruding on hers, family members who would question his choices, a lifestyle change that seemed romantic now, but might become stifling later. Was she selfish to want him to stay? To build something together, when they'd known each other such a short time? The coffee finished, and Maggie prepared 3 mugs, adding cream and sugar on the side. When she returned to the porch, the siblings fell silent. "Here you go," she said, setting the tray down on the small table. "Thank you," Emma said, adding cream to her coffee. "I was just telling Elliot that his plan to move here is unexpected." "Emma?" Elliot's tone held a warning. "No, it's fine," Maggie said. "It is unexpected. For all of us." Emma studied her over the rim of her mug. "My brother says you run this entire farm by yourself." "I do, have for years now." "That's impressive." There was a new note in Emma's voice, something like respect. "Most people couldn't handle it." "It's not for everyone," Maggie agreed, "but it's the life I chose, and now Elliot's choosing it too." Emma turned to her brother. "You realize everyone thinks you're having some sort of breakdown? First disappearing, then stepping down as CEO, now talking about moving to rural Oregon." "I don't care what everyone thinks," Elliot said calmly. "I care about what feels right, and this does." Emma sighed, a sound of exasperation and resignation. "You're always been stubborn." She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a file. "Which is why I brought these." Elliot took the folder, opening it with curiosity. "What is this?" "Information on the Morrison property you bought last year. Surveys, soil tests, building permits, everything you'll need if you're serious about developing it." Emma glanced at Maggie. "Elliot mentioned you have ideas for the land. A therapeutic animal shelter," Maggie said, surprised that Emma knew about it. "For at-risk kids and adults who need a safe place to heal." Emma nodded. "It's a good idea. With the right business plan and funding, it could be viable. Sustainable, even." Elliot looked up from the papers, his expression softening. "You did all this research?" "Someone had to think practically." Emma's tone was brisk, but her eyes were kind. "If you're really doing this, at least do it right." Maggie looked between the siblings, seeing the resemblance not just in their features but in their determination. "You're helping him?" "Us? He's my brother," Emma said simply. "And contrary to what he might have told you, I do want him to be happy. Even if that means—" She gestured at the farm around them. "All this." Elliot reached for his sister's hand, squeezing it gratefully. "Thank you, Em." Emma shrugged, but her expression was warm. "There's one more thing." She pulled another document from her briefcase. "The company's restructuring, as you know. Part of that includes expanding our corporate responsibility initiatives. The board voted this morning." She handed him the paper. Elliot's eyes widened as he read it. "They approved it?" he asked, his voice filled with disbelief and hope. "Unanimously?" Emma turned to Maggie. "Grant Tech has a new community outreach program focusing on therapeutic innovations. They're looking for pilot projects to support, particularly ones involving animals and trauma recovery." Maggie looked at the document, then at Elliot. "You did this." "I suggested it," he corrected. "The board made the decision. They saw the potential. Just like I did." He took her hand. "It means funding, support, resources, everything you'd need to make your dream a reality." It was too much to process. Maggie stood, needing a moment to compose herself. "Excuse me," she murmured, and walked to the edge of the porch, looking out at her land as the sun began to set behind the hills. After a moment, Elliot joined her, giving her space but standing close enough that she could feel his presence. "It's a lot to take in," he said quietly. "It is." She turned to face him. "Is this why you want to be with me? To have a project? A cause?" "No." His answer was immediate and firm. "The shelter is your dream, and I want to help make it happen because it matters to you. But that's not why I'm here." "Then why are you?" "Because when I was lost this place, you helped me find my way again." He gestured toward Emma, who was discreetly pretending not to watch them. "My sister came all this way, not because she thinks I'm crazy, but because she knows me well enough to see that I'm serious. That this is real." In the distance, Tucker barked, chasing something across the lower field. The sheep grazed peacefully, and the first stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. It was the same scene Maggie had watched 1,000 times before, but somehow with Elliot beside her it felt different, fuller, more complete. "I'm still scared," she admitted, "of changing, of letting someone in after being alone for so long." "I know." Elliot's voice was gentle. "And we'll take it, as slowly as you need, one day at a time. And if it doesn't work out, Then we'll deal with that too. He smiled slightly. But I have a feeling about us, Maggie Holloway, the same feeling I had when I first opened my eyes in your guest room. That this matters, she said, remembering his words. That this matters, he echoed. As the last light faded from the sky, Maggie made her decision, not out of fear or loneliness, but out of hope, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. One day at a time, she agreed, and the smile that spread across Elliot's face was like sunrise breaking over the hills. Spring came early to the hills of Oregon that year. The Morrison property, adjacent to Maggie's farm, was a flurry of activity as construction crews worked to renovate the old farmhouse and build new facilities for what would become Raindrop Haven, a therapeutic animal shelter for at-risk youth and trauma survivors. Maggie stood on the hill overlooking both properties, now connected by a path that wound through the fields. Tucker sat beside her, older and grayer but still vigilant, still her constant companion. "It's really happening," she said to the dog, who thumped his tail in agreement. Behind her, footsteps approached, familiar now after months of hearing them around her home. "Daisy had her lambs," Elliot said, coming to stand beside her. "Twins, both healthy." Maggie smiled. She always was an overachiever. They looked out at the construction site together. The main building was taking shape, with rooms for counseling, education, and community gatherings. Behind it, new barns and paddocks would house sheep, goats, horses, animals specially selected and trained to work with people who needed healing. "Emma called," Elliot said. "The first grant disbursement will be in our account by Monday, and she's lined up 3 more corporate sponsors who want to support the program." "Your sister is a force of nature," Maggie laughed. "I still can't believe she moved her entire consulting business to Portland just to be closer to this project. She says it's for the project. I think she just missed her brother." Elliot slipped an arm around Maggie's waist. "And maybe she's grown fond of a certain sheep farmer too." The month since Elliot's return had been a whirlwind of plans, permits, and possibilities. There had been adjustments, of course, moments when their different backgrounds created friction, times when Maggie's independence clashed with Elliot's eagerness to help. But they'd worked through each challenge, learning to blend their strengths, rather than allowing their differences to divide them. Elliot still traveled to New York occasionally for board meetings, and Maggie had even accompanied him once, feeling out of place in the gleaming corporate tower, but proud to stand beside him as he presented their project to potential investors. "The first group of kids comes next month," Maggie said, thinking of the foster program they'd partnered with. "Do you think we'll be ready?" "The facilities will be," Elliot assured her. "As for us, well, we've faced bigger challenges." He was right. Building Raindrop Haven had been ambitious, but building a life together, that had been the real journey. Learning to trust, to compromise, to share dreams and fears, and the everyday moments that made up a relationship. "I have something for you," Elliot said, reaching into his pocket. "I've been waiting for the right moment." He handed her a small, worn metal object, a key. "What's this?" Maggie asked, turning it over in her palm. "The key to my New York apartment." He smiled at her confused expression. "I sold it last week. Officially, I no longer have a residence in the city." Maggie stared at the key, understanding its significance. "You're really all in, aren't you? No safety net, no backup plan." "I've never been more sure of anything." Elliot took her hand, curling her fingers around the key. "This is home now, you are home." Tucker suddenly perked up, barking at something in the distance. They turned to see a familiar truck coming up the drive. Jake, delivering supplies for the construction. "I should go help unload," Elliot said, but before he could move, Maggie pulled him back. "Wait." She reached into her own pocket and pulled out something she'd been carrying for days, waiting for the perfect moment. A small velvet box. "I have something for you too." Elliot's eyes widened as she placed it in his hand. "Maggie?" "Open it," she said softly. Inside was a simple band of polished wood, inlaid with a thin strip of silver. "I made it," Maggie explained, suddenly nervous. "Well, the wood part. Had to get help with the silver. It's from one of the fence posts we fixed together that first week. When everything changed." Elliot looked from the ring to her face, emotion filling his eyes. "Are you asking?" "I'm asking if you'll stay," Maggie said. "Not just for now, but for good. If you'll build this life with me, the shelter, the farm, all of it. If you'll marry me, Elliot Grant." For a moment he seemed unable to speak. Then he slid the ring onto his finger. A perfect fit. "Yes," he said, his voice thick with emotion. 1,000 times yes. As they sealed the promise with a kiss, Tucker barked again, not in warning this time, but in what sounded remarkably like approval. In the distance, the new buildings of Raindrop Haven caught the late afternoon sun, gleaming with possibility. The sheep grazed peacefully in the fields that stretched between Maggie's farm and what was now their shared vision. And overhead, clouds gathered on the horizon, not threatening, but promising the gentle rain that kept this land green and thriving. "It's going to rain later," Maggie observed, leaning into Elliot's embrace. He smiled, remembering the storm that had brought him to her door. "Some of the best things in my life were found in the rain." As they walked hand in hand down the hill toward their future, Maggie thought about the lonely woman she'd been less than a year ago. The woman who believed she needed no one, wanted no one, could depend only on herself and her loyal dog. That woman still existed within her, strong, independent, capable. But alongside her now was something new, the understanding that true strength sometimes meant opening the door when the storm brought something unexpected, something life-changing, something worth keeping. The end.